Startuprad.io, your podcast and YouTube blog covering the German startup scene with news, interviews, and live events.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Joe from Startuprad.io, your startup podcast from Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, as well as founder and host of the world's #1 tech entrepreneurship radio called Startup.radio. Wherever you're watching this, wherever you're listening to this, go to Startuprad.io and you can learn more. Today, I would like to welcome somebody from the GSA area, originally from Austria. Christian, hey, how you doing?
Hi, Joe. Pleasure to be here. I'm doing fine.
That is great. And you are already smiling. That is a pretty good start. But you are actually here, even though you are from Austria, where most people from outside Germany, Austria, or Switzerland wouldn't be able to tell the difference. There are always slight differences, like between, what would be a good example? Between France and Belgium, between Canada and the US, those little differences between bordering countries who share languages. But today, our enablers, this is another interview in cooperation with Hessen Trade and Invest and the Enterprise Europe Network. This recording was made possible by HTAI and the Enterprise Europe Network Hessen. These organizations have made tremendous contributions to helping startup businesses succeed and thrive, providing a range of services from helping to find grants to ongoing partnerships. By taking advantage of these resources, startup companies can network and develop innovative strategies for success on the international stage. The dedicated support of HTAI and the Enterprise Europe Network Hessen is paramount in providing startup businesses with the tools for lasting success. Look for our dedicated sub-podcast in partnership with them. It's called Tech Startups Germany, or you can find the link on our link tree as well as our matching website, Startupraven.com. If you hurry, you could be the 11,000th person to sign up. But now, Christian, getting to you, and there's a lot ahead of us. As we said, you started your journey working and co-founding startups. I would say not every time, but most of the time you have been a CTO, right?
Quite often, right?
Quite often. Just out of curiosity, you've seen so many startups, so many technology companies from the inside. What is the most annoying part for a CTO there?
What is the most annoying part? That's a novel question, I must admit. The most annoying. So the most annoying thing, I think, from a CTO perspective, and it's a question, what is a CEO? CTO is, somebody who has a technical background. But I think the key part about a CTO is also that he understands business. He understands how to leverage technology for business. And the most annoying thing is, if you actually have the sense of business and have not the possibility to align business and the developers fully, which means I think it's really important that every developer understands the context of the customer, talks to the customer, engages with him, and it's clear why we do the things we do. And if this is not possible, because, for example, in my past, there is a head of product, for example, leading the product managers, head of design, leading the designers, and then you have developers and they are treated as, I allow me the term, coding monkeys. I think then you have a problem. Yeah. And as soon as this is established in a culture, I think it's really one of the biggest problems, actually. And I think it's very important that this is not the case. I think that an engineer is an artist, and it's like this kind of bricklayer story, the one thing is you're a bricklayer. The other thing is actually you're building a church, and I think this is so important, that you as an engineer are really clear what everything you do actually means for the bigger picture, and you make those decisions and you can match those decisions, because an engineer takes a lot of decisions actually every day, that you can match those decisions on why we do the things we do, and always have this bigger picture in mind. So the most annoying thing is if that's broken, this kind of orientation towards actually the business and the value you actually want to create.
Mm-hmm. I once talked to a very smart CTO, and he told me that many people with a business background don't understand if they draw something up on the whiteboard and say it has to be completely different than what we're doing right now, how much work actually the people in coding, in development do have at the end. And I do believe a lot of the job of the CTO is not only to really get the business working, meaning the tools who actually do the work in the back, but rather to also manage expectations for the business side. Would you agree to that?
No, absolutely. I think manage expectations to the business side is a key part. I would just go even further. Because there's so much effort and eventually cost and time involved in certain things. It's like when you're pregnant, you cannot speed them up. It's so important to give exactly that context. What are the impacts of a decision? But also again help to making the right decisions. Yeah, because it's very hard if I hate big decisions when they're very risky, and I think it's so important actually to break them down and lay out how this works. I mean, there has been a tremendous work done in the sense of making things more incremental, making things iterative. Yeah, because yes, you can have as a founder, CEO, you can have this kind of big vision. I want to create this platform, but where do you start? What is the first step? What does this actually mean? And there's a lot of questions around this, which especially CTO now coming to that case, that's his job, I think, from that perspective, really making that kind of, strategy plans, making this iteratively so that you don't have, like we have, like build, like in Berlin here, the airport is a big example of a construction which, is costs exploding. But in software, there are many projects which also had way more costs than you actually anticipated. Yeah. So this is the reason why this is so important, I think, to make this really in a meaningful way. And with software, it's a good thing is you can make things very iteratively typically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not like the huge leaps. You prepare something for years and make something completely different. But I'm also a believer in the very small steps. I actually had this also when I was interviewing Lukasz Gadowski and asked him for the secrets of his success. And he said always the incremental improvements. As we've already established, you are from Austria. Your very first station was a betting portal, sports betting portal called bwin, well known across Europe. How did you get this? Oh, but before we get to that, another touristic information. We already have established how beautiful Vienna can be before Christmas. Would you have another recommendation for people considering a trip to Austria?
Oh, I'm from Vienna, so I definitely recommend Vienna. It's beautiful. The Christmas markets around Christmas time are amazing. My grandmother is from Salzburg, which is in the middle of, it's also in Austria. It's in the middle of the mountains, and it's beautiful. It's a very beautiful place, especially in winter, because also you have snow and can ski there. And then I'm from Austria, so I really love the mountains. Yeah.
I see. So, and now we have this other way. How did you get into bwin? Was it a bet?
It's a little longer story, but how did I get into it? So the first thing out of university, I'm actually a university dropout because I founded my own company. Studying was very boring for me. Longer story to that. And out of that first company I founded myself, I eventually sold that and joined another company which required tech developers to build it for the IPO, which was an ad network, a little bit like Google DoubleClick network. Back then. And that didn't work out. They failed in the IPO. And that's the reason when bwin asked us, and I was seeing my back then co-founder me to join, because bwin is one of this is a global leader in online gaming and gambling, which means sports betting, but also poker and other products. Yeah? And back then, when I joined, it was 30 people. And actually, literally, I was the first engineer. It's an interesting story because I think they did an IPO without actually having anything built themselves internally. And they said they want to become the leader in online gaming, gambling. So from that perspective, they said, okay, hey, Christian, can you help us to build that actually? And it was back then, again, this was 2001, yeah. Back then, I think from a tech perspective, it was a really interesting problem. It's like a little bit like And I don't like to, looking back, I wouldn't do that anymore. But back then it was just really interesting. Pornography and betting have been quite advanced when it comes to technology, and they faced a lot of challenges because also there was a business opportunity quite early on. And for me, talking about the technology side, I had the opportunity to help that. And it's like really interesting because you have these world championships, yeah, and then you have this kind of live games and how to make that actually happening, how to build this, and you have to try to deal with cybersecurity when people try to extort you actually to get money and threaten you to shut it down. It's a lot of complexity, and building that was quite exciting. And it was a long journey. I was, as mentioned, joining as number 30th roughly, and I was leaving when it was 3,000 people. So I went through this 9 years for really like this kind of growth period from the early days, literally, to building it to the world's online leader in that business. Yeah.
Just another question out of pure curiosity, slow Joe here. Would you still have an idea how you could game online betting websites?
So it's an interesting business. In a nutshell, the bookkeepers, the bookies who make the odds, they're professionals in their sports, and they have all the data on their side. Yeah. But then again, the reality is, if you, and there are many people who are really good as well in sports, like in tennis, and it depends sometimes on one person, then you have a really good chance actually to be better than the bookkeeper, because at the end it's just odds which they put in favor. In a nutshell, that's the reason you can win at one game eventually. But I think it's really tough. It's like with all those systems, there's a likelihood which is in favor of the house. So on the long run, it's just designed in a way that it's fun, but you also lose money in a nutshell. Yeah. So that's the reason why I'm not a fan in general of online sports betting, except if it's for the thrill and for the fun, then it's fine. But I think there are too many negative effects looking now back, why I wouldn't recommend it in general, from my perspective. If you play to earn money, it's just wrong. That's the problem about gambling, I think.
Exactly. And then at one point you decide to leave, but you went for a little bit larger group. All the people listening to us on a regular basis, they would know Scout24 group. They have been maybe the first successful people building up platforms here. For example, used cars and real estate comes to mind, because that they have been the best known platforms there. Auto Scout 24, meaning Car Scout 24 and Immobilien Scout 24, Real Estate Scout 24 was something that stuck into my mind.
Yes, and I had to put out, so I was joining an Austrian entity, which is called Immobilien.net actually, and it was just later acquired by Scout24, and had an opportunity to become their CTO, which for me was really interesting because it was the first time I could really step into this kind of technology leadership role. And as it turned out, I mentioned before this kind of, what I thought is one of the challenges for CTOs. I also had the opportunity there to be responsible for a product. And then together, not just shape the technology strategy, but also shape the product strategy. And for me, this was one of the really interesting learning curve, but also seeing the benefits actually of these two sides coming together, and being like in line and having a really clear path for success. Yeah. But in Austria, it was the leader, the largest platform. It's like if all of these platforms, if it's very hard, if you have the biggest offer, because it's a demand, you have the supplier side and demand side. And from that perspective, it was really interesting because pretty much every real estate in Austria I was responsible for was on our platform back then.
Talking about the supply and demand side here, then you went for a dating website, which I found pretty interesting. And it gave me the question, did it change how you look for a partner?
So yes, that I joined Parship. Peter Schmidt actually did ask me to join. And he was convincing me actually with that also to move to Hamburg, which I enjoyed. Looking back, was quite a lot. Yeah, and I also there had the opportunity to also be responsible actually for science department, and at partially we would say it's not dating, it's matchmaking. We have been really in this topic for making people long-term relations actually successful, and I learned actually a lot of it. The founder or one of the founders, Dr. Schmale, he was actually a path therapist for centuries, and he did travel around all over Germany for a very long time and doing research about what makes actually successful relations. He himself, I think, was 3 times married, has multiple kids. Yeah, so he made also some hands-on experience himself, and he was the inventor of the algorithm behind that actually. And it's a really interesting one because I think it's not just true for relationships, private ones, but also for business relationships. It's built on the principle that actually, if to make a long-term relation successful, there needs to be certain things in common, so that you really get along with each other. But there need to be a certain differences, so that you have enough thing to keep it interesting on the long term. Yeah. And figuring this kind of matching algorithm out and what this is and how can you ask real good questions so that it's not obvious, but indirect actually, was one of the secrets at the beginning of actually the algorithm behind it. And it was an amazing job that you really get letters from people who actually built their relationship based on that principle and then did get kids. And it was from that perspective really an exciting journey. And now I think today Parship is also a global leader even in matchmaking, but now they also do actually dating. So they extended their portfolio from that perspective. Yeah.
I see. Two more, maybe 3 more positions I would like to pick out because what I found interesting, you have been for a few months Chief Product Officer with the World Food Program, Share the Meal. Very interesting position. Plus, what also stands out, what many people label you've been for a little bit over a year, almost 2 years, the CTO of N26 Group, the online bank, the challenger bank we talked about so frequently in the news in the past. What I found personally quite interesting is in one interview, you said you helped them build a scalable platform. Where was the difference between betting, matchmaking in terms of real estate, matchmaking in terms of couples to getting an online bank? I mean, there's quite a difference in here, at least from my personal perspective.
Yeah, maybe talking about the N26 here first. I know Valentin and Maximilian, the founders of N26, since they have been in the accelerator, Axel Spring Plug and Play accelerator. I was mentor for them. Yeah? So that's how we actually know each other since they founded N26, since the inception. And only 2015, actually, I joined them because they have done the Series A. And they said, hey, we actually started off with a very different product, which was Papaya, which was a teenager credit card, actually. And then they switched to become a full bank. And they had they said, hey, they actually didn't have a real working product to make this scalable and working, but that's just a first rough iteration. And they asked me to help to build that product and the tech team from that perspective. And I was joining from that perspective then as a CTO to help them on the one hand side build this whole core banking system, build integrations with partners like Wise, for example, but also for investment, for example, and then get a banking license in that combination. So build really a fully accredited, core banking system, which can be supported and licensed. And we've built the first core banking system in the cloud. I think nobody else before that was actually running on AWS in that kind of case. We used AWS as a technology provider there. And that was a very interesting and very exciting journey from that perspective as well. Working alongside Max and Valentin and helping them really to shape the next generation bank and how this can actually look like from that perspective. And the great thing about it is it was always very focused on users who wanted to bank with their mobile devices and want to have full control and transparency on their finances. And that's what we did also when it comes to the product, how we designed everything to make it really built for the people who want to have constant transparency and control of their finances. And it's the reason why everything which N26 has is designed actually for instant changes, for example, and also information, for example, when it comes to push notification. Today it's all very normal and standardized, but back then it was really novel in many regards. Yeah. What I've learned, maybe just to ask this question about Divin and what has this to do eventually with N26. So obviously I'd never worked in finance actually before. I never had worked in a bank before. Yeah. And then I thought it's very brave of Marks and Valentin to ask me actually to join and build a bank with them. So it was for myself actually a learning journey and also a tough one, to be honest. But on the other hand side, in the favor of me, I had some experience with Bwin, building actually, in a nutshell, a gambling system, which you have accounts, you have fraud, it's actually from a technology perspective, very similar. Yeah, there is the transactional consistency, high amount of volume, scalability, security, all these things matter in both very much. And again, it's also the topic just of fraud. I think at N26 at Bwin we had, I don't know, I think the Coconut Islands, for example, they exist, and they have, 5,000 people, inhabitants. And I think we had registered, like at Bwin, 5,000 people from those islands. Yeah. And obviously that cannot be true. Yeah. But back then it was like always a question, how can we figure it out? And the same is true for N26. So that's where I say there's a lot of benefits actually from, again, now technology and product perspective and analogies, what you can learn from one and the other one. Yeah.
Don't worry, that's totally fine. Very interesting insights. And I only would mention one more position. You are a member of the Founder Institute in Berlin, which, by the way, is also present here in Frankfurt, and they doing a lot of good work. Big shout out to those guys. And now let's do the complete circle from betting to matching real estate and cars, to matching couples, to doing finances, to have a non-profit online university you co-founded. How did this happen?
Looking forward, nothing makes sense. Now looking backward, it all comes together somehow because over the time, so one of the things I'm actually in love with since I dropped out of university is to use technology to have an impact. Now, what is impact has changed over time, to be fair on that side. Yeah, but I was always fascinated by this kind of solving problems and really having an impact on people's life. Yeah, and it shifted now. The later we get, because also I have kids. I have 3 kids now. So it shifted more to sustainability, to have on the societal way to have a positive impact. But it was always my interest on that perspective, and this is something which is the red line throughout my whole life from that perspective. And just maybe coming to this, as mentioned, partially it was very great. I'm thankful for having that opportunity. I was also with N26. It was really great to have been part of that story and that journey, and actually have the opportunity to do this. Now looking back, really tremendous. And even game-changing things from that perspective. And tomorrow, now just to mention now what tomorrow is. Yeah, tomorrow is a next generation university which we are developing currently, and or have already built and serving learners, where we want to help to educate and empower the change makers of tomorrow. So that we believe actually that this kind of sustainable society is created by empowered and educated individuals. And that's the reason why we are building this kind of next generation university. And that's a very important thing now because, I mentioned that I dropped out of university, but the reality is that my kids have been in homeschooling here in the pandemic. And I noticed that nothing has changed in learning since I was in school. And the world has, these kind of libraries which have been really limited accessibility hundreds of years ago. Now you open your smartphone and you have any information at your fingertips, or with AI tools now, it just is a different environment. And I think that many of the education systems today are not designed for that. And they're not designed for actually helping you to learn. They're designed for helping you to know and remember things at a certain point of time. And I had always the feeling in school that I just need to learn something for the test, but there was no purpose. And the reality is, in all those journeys from BWin to N26, I had to learn a lot. And it was really challenging to do this by myself, because if you're by yourself and try to understand the things which maybe you could have learned at the university, it's a lot of effort, and it's a lot of, you need to build up a network of experts. For example, at N26, I didn't have a clue about core banking systems. So I reaching out, finding people who can help me to understand things better. Asking them a lot of questions, understanding how finance system work, how the SWIFT money transfer works. It's a lot of reading and diving very deep into it. And I think that the right education really can accelerate you. So that's the reason why we founded the N20 Tomorrow University, to help really those kind of change makers, so that we can empower and educate them.
I understand. I actually have to tell you, I'm pretty surprised because you quoted Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher who said life is only understood backward but lived forwards. Something I also totally do agree. A quote another great teacher taught me. Big shout out to Miguel Carrillo here. And that is fascinating because I hear this quite so often. So you are an online university. You're officially headquartered here in lovely Frankfurt, but as we know, it doesn't make a lot of difference in terms of online university because your reach can be global. Do you have like streaming classes where people can actually live participate? And do you accommodate different time zones? Talking about if people in Asia could consider joining your university. People use Pacific Coast. It's always a little bit tiresome to get something agreed between those two extremes because it's like a big world and we only have 24 hours in each day. How do you do your education there? Like in terms of really attending classes? And how do you substitute what so many great universities still do, meaning building the network, thinking about the MBA programs, for example, they're the classical networking stuff, when you are on site? How do you do that?
So that's a big question because it has a lot to do with, also what I learned myself, how actually learning works. And in a nutshell, it comes from, and that's why I don't like the term online university so much. For us, it's really about how can we help you to learn effectively. And the reality is there's a lot of learning science and about this, and we know since 30 years how to do it actually. It's just hard to change systems. And this is also the reason why we founded Tomorrow University as a new player, because I think it's very easy. Sometimes it's easier to build something from the scratch and design it just that way. And when it comes to our learning model, our students learn based on real world challenges. So we like to say that also we love to bring you a little bit out of your comfort zone. And based on these real world challenges, you build up that knowledge which you apply on the challenge. And then when you apply it on the challenge, you actually create real working products, and that you submit, but also you give feedback to other students on what matters actually. And in that regard, you have a self-reflection on you distill what really matters, and which is called mastery learning from that perspective. And this is one part how we do this, and the other part is that, and we like this kind of success formula from our perspective. We help you to define your purpose. We help you to learn, become competent, and learn the 21st century skills, and we also help you to build a network. And that combined it has the goal to help you to have an impactful career. And our learners come from around the world. You mentioned that already. Currently, the learning, the time zone when the classes are happening in the evening. So it's way easier actually in Asia to join our classes than in the US. Yet we have from both sides actually learners who are coming to us, and very different backgrounds from that perspective. If you imagine learning, it's very hard to concentrate and have a lecture and concentrate in a lecture. And I'm talking here about a physical hall. If you imagine, and I was at the university and I was sitting in classes, like lectures, there are 500 people just listening. It's pretty best, the best time to sleep. Yeah. And I think this is online just worse. If you have a lecture where somebody is talking, it's really hard if it's 90 minutes that you actually keep attention. So that's the reason why we also minimize anything. We don't have traditional lectures, actually. We minimize any sessions which are live to high interactive sessions. Everything from self-study time you can do in your own time. There are group works where you come together, but again, then you as a group come together and you can schedule that. Yeah. So from our learning perspective, you'll have a lot of flexibility. If there are videos, and we also have short videos which are sometimes really good to explain some certain things better, then we integrate them. But they are always very short and very to the point and part of the self-study time typically. So the from an online university program, it's just from a model different. We're focusing on interaction to keep you really engaged. And this is also one of the, I think, exciting ways how you learn best. Is that you apply things, because we don't have this kind of knowledge tests. Yeah. If you study with us, you submit your work and you get feedback on a quantitative and qualitative scale on the challenges you actually submit on your challenge submissions. Yeah. From that perspective. And maybe to mention one more sentence, just to say this, what do you learn? Actually, we have different programs. You mentioned already our Impact MBA program, which is about sustainability, leadership, and innovation. The idea is really to help you transform yourself, transform your team and your organization. So this is one part. And we have a Master of Science, Entrepreneurship and Technology. This is especially if you are thinking about eventually starting a company, if you're thinking about maybe changing your career to something sustainable. And then we have bachelor programs in, for example, responsible entrepreneurship, or a bachelor in AI and sustainable technologies.
I see. So it's really broad. Of course, we'll as always link down here in the show notes the whole university. And I do assume over time you may expand your program a little bit. Also, what is interesting for me, we already said it's a non-profit organization, but you still raised venture capital. Are we talking about impact capital here? And what is the special challenge for a non-profit ed tech startup, which guys you are?
So that's an interesting one. Our organization is a combination of both. Yeah? That's what you mentioned. We have on the one hand side venture capital, and on the other hand side we are non-profit. Why is this so important? We are mission driven. Yeah. So our purpose is to accelerate transition to sustainable society. That's what we care about. And we care a lot about actually how we can actually empower the people to have an impact for career for that reason. Yeah? And that's also how we measure our success. Yeah. To ensure that we have a high quality educational mission and they can fulfill that. That's the reason why we have our non-profit. On the other hand side, we really want to have impact. And impact, we have this theory of change. If you look at the planet, we have 8 billion people, and you need to reach a certain number of people to have a certain number of change. And we have a calculation for that. And we want to reach actually 1 billion people by 2030. Now you can ask me 2030 if we achieve that. I'm really curious myself. But I fully believe that this is realistic and possible. And with that also what we are creating is actually a community for this kind of change towards sustainability. And for that, you need capital. And you need the freedom to act. Yeah, and that's the reason this is the venture case where we also have a technology team where we build a software platform for effective learning. And this is where we raised also money and where we need to raise money to actually build that kind of scale.
I see. So, what would you think about the universities that are still around, like the physical universities, do they need to move a little bit more into the direction of online degrees? And would you guys also need to have, for example, on a regular basis in bars in Paris, in London, wherever your students are, some hangouts that the people at least who are in the same city studying or in the same general area studying? Would you think that is a way that those two models somehow merge a little bit, so you can have the best of both worlds?
So the interesting thing is learning online really works more effective pretty much. And what we also can do is with technology, we can personalize the learning way better to you than what you as a teacher. If you have a class of 50 people, it's very hard to adopt the learning to the individual. It's very hard to fit his needs. And so we do really an amazing job then. We see this with my kids every day in school, how hard is this for teachers? Yeah? And I think this is where technology can help. And this is also where online learning eventually is more effective. And the same is true for meeting the right people. We can connect you actually really effectively online. We can match you from that perspective with people around the world to come together, to collaborate, to learn from each other, to connect. Yeah. But yet we are social beings. Yeah. And I think this kind of social personal connection to deepen actually relationships is really, really important. And it's not just, it's important for everybody of us. Yeah. So that's the reason why what we do is we have, online, we have a campus in the metaverse, which is also already social. So you see who's interacting. You can approach people. You have this kind of classes where it's not just transactional. You see the academic before, you can walk him up, ask him questions, and it's actually a very good experience already. But nonetheless, we're combining it with meetups around the world. So last week, for example, we had a meetup in Hamburg. We had one in Vienna, we had one in Berlin. We will do one in Paris and London, where the students come together actually, and there they connect and celebrate, party, etc. And we have local learning groups. For example, Frankfurt, you mentioned as well. We have in Berlin, but in the different regions, everywhere around the world, where we have a certain number of students, they come together and connect, and go spinning in the dark room, together, depending on the location. But we believe this is actually an amazing opportunity to do what you mentioned. The best side of both is to learn flexibly on the one hand side, but then also connect in person on the other hand side.
And you're going to take this challenge to 1 billion people?
So at the end, what we believe is we want to reach 1 million people in total with all
1
our
million.
programs. Mm-hmm. 1 million, not 1 billion. Still a difference there.
Just to make sure. If somebody is listening to that who is interested in impact investment, in spreading education, would you be open to talk to new investors?
Always love to engage with supporters, investors, anybody who really cares about the transition to a sustainable society is more than welcome. Everybody who also wants to support education and invest in this field, please don't hesitate to reach out. Best one is always to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm. We, of course, will link your LinkedIn profile down here. Many links in there. Also question, would you be open to, for example, some accomplished entrepreneurs who would be willing to donate a lot of money to give his name to your business school?
Let's connect.
Let's connect. Okay. I would assume you're also looking for good people, like in terms of teaching stuff but also other people?
Yes. So constantly, as we are growing, we're looking for people to join our team. The interesting part, now our students come from around the world. Doesn't matter if it's from Europe or China or Asia or US, I meant, but also our team members. So we also have a very international team, also working remote, and actually very simple, similar principle. We also meet in person from time to time on the other hand side. And on careers.tomorrow.university, you find all our current job openings.
we'll also have the link down here in the show note, and it's called career.tomorrow.university. And the last question after I will leave you is, we are talking here about the state of Hessen, sponsored by the state of Hessen indirectly. What would be your feedback, your wishes for the future, for the decision makers out there actually currently in the process of getting a new government in place after we had election just a few days ago?
So I must admit, so typically Germany has not the reputation as an innovation leader, but I must admit that the state of Hessen did actually an amazing job in that regard. We are the first and currently only edtech in Europe to become a state-recognized university and the lead in the innovation side, and that's thanks to the ministry here in Hessen, the Ministry of Innovation, the Ministry of Education, and we are actually really excited that they are pioneering this with us together from that perspective. What we always love, and also to work together and support, to work on the digitalization of processes, and also allowing us to serve students from around the world, which is also, again, depending on the regulations of the state, possible. So to continuously work on actually educating and empowering the people, thinking cross boundaries even, because, there's kind of, as a region now, you can also have a long and big impact on way beyond your region. And I think this is really exciting, especially also for Hessen from my perspective. Yeah. So this continues being open to that and having this kind of discussions. How can we make these things possible? I really highly appreciate it.
Great. So thank you very much for the interview. I do have the feeling that we'll have you back in some time. Everybody who'd like to learn more, go down here in the show notes. There's a link to our Medium blog where you find the link to Tomorrow University, Christian's LinkedIn profile, as well as the career website and a lot of other stuff. Christian, it was a pleasure talking to you, even though we are a little bit longer than the usual recording, but with all the interesting positions you had, all the interesting stories you could tell, I think that's not surprising here. Thank you very much for being a guest.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Joe. It was a pleasure to be with you.
And thanks to our sponsors, and have a good day. Bye-bye.
That's all, folks. Find more news, streams, events, and interviews at www.startuprad.io. Remember, sharing is caring.